The idea of leading a group sharing a story occurred to me something like 8 years ago. I thought I'd like to do this, but I decided I didn't want to do that using novels. I didn't want people to come along and be introduced to a novel, take it away and come back next month and discuss it. I wanted something a bit more immediate and a bit more dramatic, I think. What I wanted to do was to read poetry, so that people would actually come along, read the poetry and discuss it as they went along. And by the end of the session, they would have finished the poem. That really appealed to me. So I got a group together and we started reading Shakespeare's plays. Yeah, there's 37 of them, which is quite a lot. And they took a number of years to get through, and I kept on rereading some of them for about 8 years. And then I came to the point when I thought, this is all very well. We've learnt a lot. It's been enjoyable. We sat in a circle and we shared the poems. We haven't had parts to read out. We simply read the next speech as it comes, and we've followed it and we've understood what's going on. And we've all developed, including me, we developed our understanding of Shakespeare and the words that he uses and the stories. So it was a wonderful education for all of us, I think. But I decided I'd like something a little different. And I wonder whether we could take this idea of reading round in a circle and apply it to reading Homer's Odyssey. This is a book that I've known for a very long time, and I remember little bits of it from childhood too. So it had a long history for me. So we set out to read Homer's Odyssey. We met in Taunton, the meetings room in Taunton Library, and we met every couple of months, and we gradually, over a period of a year or so, read the whole of the 24 books of the Odyssey, which actually has 12,000 lines in it, which may not sound a lot, but it takes a long time to get through. And as we read, we discussed and we shared our thoughts about it. There's plenty of humour, surprisingly, to me. And it was all a lot of fun, and there was a social atmosphere. People got together and they met up every month or two. It was all a very nice experience in the library. I've been reading at home. The Shakespeare group I've been running at home for those 8 years, but now it was rather fun to get into a bigger space and have more people. And that was fine, but it began to come to an end, and I thought, well, where do I take the group now? Will they be willing to continue with something else? I thought long and hard about the possible second epic to read, and of course, in the end, I chose to read Homer's Iliad. I was a bit doubtful about it because it's full of warfare, it's full of death and destruction, it's full of melancholy and sorrow, but it's also full of joy, and the poetry in many places is just sublime. And it also touches on aspects of life that we all experience, and so it gives us a good window into our own lives and a means of discussing it. Well, this was wonderful, and I kept going for a long time, and that took over a year to read. And then I began, in for a penny, in for a pound, I thought, why stop there? There are other epics I would love to share with people. And so I formed another group, and we decided that we would read a various range of other epics. Unfortunately, COVID had come along, and the effect of COVID was to shut down the possibility of meeting in person in the library. So what would we do? Well, I turned to the computer, I turned to Zoom, and we very easily transferred our reading experiences onto Zoom with one big benefit. We could read much more frequently, so it's once a fortnight. We didn't have to travel anywhere to meet up. It was very easy to do from home, whatever the weather, however far the distance. And I then thought, let us now read Beowulf, and then let us read Sir Gawain of the Green Knight. And then what about Gilgamesh? These were some of the epics that I wanted to read. And so we set off with another group achieving that. Now, these long reads are challenging for people. If you're reading a poem as long as the Iliad or the Odyssey, which takes over a year, how do I maintain interest in people for all that length of time with big gaps between each session? I did it in a number of ways. I always introduced the whole book. I introduced each session. I would produce a summary of what had happened last time, the story so far, if you like, and sent that by email to people. So when they came along for the next reading, they were genned up on exactly what had been going on in the previous reading. And this all, of course, takes some time. I'd use pictures to interest them and to enthuse them. And we had looked at the cultural context of these stories, where they came from, how they fitted into their own culture. And all in all, we had a really interesting way of exploring something that was important. And these epics, I chose epics because they have the power as poetry, an intense power of poetry, to convey emotions. And I wanted people to be engaged in that level of story. And I found that epic did it, especially if the epic is translated from its original language into poetry. Why aloud? Well, that was the thing that began. As a child, I stuttered. And so I relished the idea of discovering that I could read without stuttering aloud to other people and not be frightened or embarrassed about it. And that's what I found I could do. But reading aloud for adults is a very special experience. You get to hear sounds that you make. I could feel the sound of the words in my mouth, the shape and the sound of them. I can produce a word in very many different ways in sound, even though it's the same word. I can experiment with that. And I can see the effect on my listeners of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So it's all the kind of storytelling skills that I think are delightful. And I see people in these groups developing their ability to express not only in the words they're using, but how they're using those words. So we meet once a fortnight online using Zoom. I've got several groups running. They each meet on different days. We meet for an hour and a half. People need to buy their own copies of the book. They need to be able to use Zoom to a minimal extent. And I asked them to pay a £10 subscription to cover the costs of my subscription with Zoom and various other costs that I have. So there you have it, an Epic Read-Aloud group.